Hello everybody, this is Todd Blankenship with RocketStock.com, and today we're going to do some Spider-Man inspired kind of stuff. So here we go. This is a kind of a heads-up display look that I put together using the elements from our Interface HUD pack. If you haven't seen the pack already, be sure to check it out. It's got over 400 elements. Everything in here is super detailed, and obviously, you know, if I were to do this all myself, this tutorial would probably be like 8 hours long. So using these elements, you can save yourself a lot of time and build some really impressive looks, and everything is also super customizable as well. So obviously, we had to do kind of a reimagining of the classic Spider-Man look, because as we started looking for a good Spider-Man costume for this tutorial, we kind of realized that most of them aren't exactly ideal.
I think the legs are a little baggy on you.
So he's kind of, you know, Spider-Man, he's testing out his gear. He's got the red gardening gloves and all that. And plus, this part ended up looking pretty cool. So what I have here is our edit sequence of this kind of opening scene, and I'm going to send our shot that we want to add our special effects to After Effects. And the way that we can do that is with Dynamic Link. So what we do is just right click on the footage there, and we'll hit Replace with After Effects Composition. And what that's going to do is it's going to open up After Effects, and After Effects is going to ask us to save a project file. And so here we go. Now we have our shot data in After Effects, and anything that we do in here is going to show up in Premiere. And this is just a really nice workflow to keep everything organized. You don't have a bunch of, you know, render past files and all that sort of stuff. It's all just right there in Premiere every time you make a change. So the first thing we need to do is track our footage and get everything rigged up so that we can add our elements in. So I'm going to go ahead and select our footage layer and right click, and then we'll select Pre-Compose. And now in here, you want to make sure to select Move All Attributes. So this first part is a little bit time consuming. What you have to do is track each finger individually. So to do that, I'm going to create a null object for every one of his fingers and then add tracking data to each one. So first, let's create some null objects. So down here, I'm going to go ahead and right click, go to New, select Null Object, and I'm going to duplicate that 9 times. So hit Command D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So now we should have 10 null objects, and I'm just going to go ahead and name each one for each one of his fingers. So we'll start with left thumb, and then left pointer, and so on. Okay, so now here you can see I've gone ahead and named each of the null objects for each of his fingers. So I'm going to go ahead and just start with his left thumb. So first, go ahead and select the footage, and go ahead and select Track Motion. So now we're in our tracker here, and for the finger tracks, we're not concerned about having rotation data included. We just want the position. Only leave position checked, and let's just go into the options here. So for this track, luminance is going to be a good option because this background is kind of brighter and we want to track the darker area. So luminance is going to track the contrast, so that's a good choice. Now here on this little drop down, I want to make sure that Stop Tracking is selected. Usually it's set to Adapt Feature, I think, by default. So make sure you switch it to Stop Tracking, and then I like to set the confidence level to 90%. And what that does is if the tracker is less than 90% confident that it's tracking what you want it to, it'll stop tracking. So that way you can nudge it back into place and continue the track. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit OK. And also select Edit Target and make sure that the drop down is set to the right finger that you're about to track. So I'm going to start with the left thumb. So I'm going to make sure that the target is set to left thumb. Hit OK. And then now let's go ahead and get our tracking point set up. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and widen the feature region and the search region just by dragging out a little bit. That'll work. And let's just drag it right about to the pad of his thumb there. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the Analyze Forward button. Okay, right there, you see that it stopped? That's because the thumb started to turn and the content in the feature region started to look a little bit different. So all we have to do is just confirm for the software that the tracking point is in the right location, and then we can just go ahead and hit Analyze Forward again. Okay, stopped again. Still looks good though, so we can just keep hitting Analyze Forward. This just gives us the ability to double check that it is tracking the right area. And if we hit the U key on our footage layer here, it brings up our tracking data. So we can see that we need to pick it up from about here. And one thing you'll notice is that on this portion of the shot, the movement is a lot quicker. So we're going to have to do a lot more fine tuning by hand. So go ahead and hit analyze backward and let's see what happens. Okay, so right there, it jumped off. And we can see now our tracking point is actually starting to move a little bit. So I'm going to nudge it right back down to the pad of his thumb there. And we'll hit analyze back again. So there it only got about 1 frame. But that's okay because there's not that many frames where the motion is this strong. So we can just keep nudging it back into place and go frame by frame. Sometimes your tracking point isn't very easy for the software to resolve. So sometimes you just have to keep nudging it back into place yourself. So we have our tracking data. We need to apply it to our null. And it was set to left thumb, just confirm, and hit OK. So here you go. Now you can see we have the null object attached to the thumb there. So now what you need to do is repeat that process for every single finger. And that's okay because it's only extremely tedious. And so here you go. Fast forward about 25 minutes later, I have null objects for every one of his fingers and they're all labeled. So now I want to get tracking data for the hands. And here you'll notice the hands aren't moving that much independently of the wrists. So what we can do is actually get tracking data from these points on our little makeshift web shooters here. So let's skip forward to a frame where the hands have kind of established themselves in the frame. And real quick, let's go ahead and make a null object for the left hand. And let's go ahead and just make one for the right hand as well. Okay, so select our footage and go to track motion. And let's go ahead this time and use rotation as well. And for this one, we're going to do the left hand. So go ahead and set the target to left hand. And let's move this tracking point to this part. And this tracking point to this part. And let's go ahead and see what happens. So let's hit analyze forward. Okay, so right there it already went out. So maybe these tracking points aren't the best, but we'll go ahead and just keep trying them out. Just see what we can get. So just for a little bit, just keep nudging them into place. Okay. Got a little further that time. And so it's a good idea to just kind of remember exactly where your tracking point goes. So I'm kind of putting it right at the top of this sort of curve here. And so just kind of keep an eye on that as it tracks. Okay, cool. So we've got through the end of the shot. We're going to go ahead and open up the tracking points here and just see where it all left off. And it looks like we stopped right about there. So now we'll go ahead and do the frame by frame thing like before and just keep nudging it back into place as needed. And this process is just a really important thing to know how to do because a lot of times you won't have very good tracking data in your scene and you'll have to do it by hand. So let's do the same process for the right hand. I'm going to go to the first frame where it's kind of established itself pretty well. I think right there looks good. And select our footage, go to track motion, position, rotation, keep them both selected, and let's just position it right over the same spot. When you're doing frame by frame stuff like this, it's just important to keep remembering how cool the thing that you're doing will probably look because it does take some time. Okay, so let's make sure that right hand is selected, which it is, and we'll hit apply. All right, everyone, I have good news. I think all of our tracking data is now complete. All right, so right here, you'll see I've imported the interface HUD pack, and we have all of our different categories here: circles, code, digits, equalizers. Another thing that you'll see is that a lot of these elements have an in clip, an out clip, and a loop clip. And what that does is it allows you to have your elements loop for as long as you need them to. So let's go ahead and start building out our heads-up display here. The first thing that I want to do is create some circles to kind of go to his tracked fingers. So here in Interface, we have this really cool circles folder that will be perfect for this. I'm going to go ahead and start with this element right here. This is circle 5. And the way that I like to quickly make a comp with the in, loop, and out clips is I select all three and just drag that to the new comp button. And then it's going to bring up this dialog box, and what you want to select is single composition and make sure that sequence layers is selected. And what that's going to do is it's going to put them in order as they are. So now we have the in animation, and then it kind of spins around a little bit, and then it animates out. And what I'm going to do also is just kind of add some other stuff to it just to fill it out a little bit in the middle. If you go into the tiny objects folder, this is just a really cool folder just to add nice little tiny details wherever you need them. I like this little doohickey right here. I think that's perfect. That'll just go kind of right in the middle of his thumb. So I'm going to drag that in as well, and it's long enough for our clip here. So I think that's going to look pretty cool. So there we go. I'm actually going to duplicate that and make it slightly bigger as well. And just to quickly add some variation, I'm going to select that layer, go up to Layer, Time, and select Time Reverse Layer. And I also want to fill in some more of this area here. So I'm going to go to Spheres. So I think I like this one right here. So I'm going to go ahead and select the in, the loop, and the out, just like before, and drag it in here. So this time, to sequence everything correctly again, I'm going to select all 3 layers here. I'm going to go up to Animation, Keyframe Assistant, and select Sequence Layers. And that'll more or less do the same thing that we had before. And we do not want to select overlap. What that'll do is have it fade between layers, and we'll hit OK. So now everything is in the appropriate order. And just to keep everything organized, I'm going to go ahead and pre-compose that. So I'm going to select those layers. I'm going to right-click and select pre-compose. And let's just call this what the element is called, which is sphere _2. Move all attributes and hit OK. So now we have it as one object, and I'm just going to scale that down like so. And then I'm going to add a mask just to kind of feather it out in the middle. So I'm going to select our sphere layer here, grab the ellipse tool, and now holding the shift key, I'm going to drag out and just kind of select a circle in the middle there, just like that. Try to keep it as much in the center as possible. And then I'm going to go ahead and invert it, and I'm going to feather that probably to about 50. So there we go. Now we have a pretty cool little element for our finger here. So we're going to add that to both thumbs. So here we go. We have circle 5. I'm just going to go ahead and rename that comp thumb print. And I'm going to go back to our main comp here. And right here, I'm just going to go ahead and drag that element right above the left thumb null. So now we have this in the scene here. I'm going to drag it right over above the thumb, and I'm going to hit the S key for scale, and we'll scale that down. So I think somewhere right around there is going to look pretty cool. And now we need to parent this object to our left thumb null. And the way we'll do that is we'll select this pick whip here on the parent section and drag it to left thumb. And I also don't want it to fully appear until everything's kind of established. So we're just going to kind of move the time, say somewhere around there. So there we go. That object's right there. So now I'm going to just add that to the right thumb. So I'm just going to select our thumbprint layer, hit Command D to duplicate. I'm going to drag that right above the right thumb null object, and then go ahead and parent that to that as well. We'll just move that right above the right thumb there. I also like timing to all look kind of random and different from each other, so I'm just going to drag that about 2 frames to the right, just so it's ever so slightly different from the right finger, so it doesn't all look like it's popping up at the exact same time. And I think it's okay to go ahead and use that same object for the pointer finger as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate that, drag it up above the left pointer, change the parent here, and move it above the pointer finger. Let's do the same thing on the right. So just duplicate it by hitting Command D, drag it above the pointer layer, change the parent to the right one, and drag it to the correct finger. So now I'm going to go ahead and create a circle object for the remaining fingers. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select our thumbprint comp up here, and I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that by hitting Command D again. And we'll just call this one fingerprint. Go ahead and open that up, and let's just play around with this, make it different. So I'm going to start with a different base layer here. I'm going to go ahead and go back into the circle folder, and we'll just find something maybe a little bit less busy for the other fingers. Okay, so I really like that right there. So I'm going to grab the in clip, the loop clip, and the out clip, drag it into our finger layer here. And just like before, I'm going to select all 3, go up to Animation, Keyframe Assistant, Sequence Layers, hit OK. And I'm going to pre-compose that. We'll call it Circle 20, and let's scale it down. Hit the S key, bring it down a little bit, and I just noticed we're cutting off some of the edges here, so I'm just going to go ahead and widen the composition settings of the Circle 20 layers. So we'll go up to Composition Settings, and just up that up until we're no longer cutting off the edges. That looks good. And I'm going to go ahead and kill the Sphere 2 layer, and let's size up these tiny objects again just a little bit. So now we'll go back into our original comp, and let's just put everything where it's supposed to go. So we have our fingerprint. Let's just kind of roughly move it up to the middle finger there, and let's just drag it above the left middle null object. Scale it down, hit the S key, scale it till it looks about where you want it. Let's try that right there. We'll put the scale at about 14. Make sure it's parented to the correct spot, so left middle is the option there. And let's just go ahead and duplicate that and do that for every finger. Okay, so here you can see I've got our elements above each of the correct fingers here, and they're all moving at about the same time. So like I said before, I like for stuff to have different movement to them in terms of timing. So I'm just going to kind of start dragging stuff around, just make it a little bit different from each other. So I've kind of shifted the timing around a little bit, and you can see now it's added some variance to the rotation, and they all look like they are independent of each other instead of, just the same element. It makes it look a little bit more custom. So now just a reminder, if we hop back over to Premiere, see now you can see we've got our color correction layer and an adjustment layer here. We've got a 35 millimeter grain element from our emulsion pack, if you want to check that out. And here you can see our elements are showing up. So now we're going to go ahead and add some glow to these elements. So I'm going to go ahead and click one of the thumbprint layers here and go up to Effect and select Stylize Glow. And so now we'll just go ahead and kind of fine tune a nice looking glow here. For this first layer here, I'm going to change the radius something about 120. So let's go back and see what it looks like with the glow. So there you go. It's a nice little glow. So now we'll go ahead and select our glow effect here and hit Command C to copy it, and select our other elements and hit Command V to paste it. So now everything's got the glow on it. And I'm also going to go ahead and select all of our element layers again, and let's switch them all to add mode. So let's go back and look and see what it looks like in our main comp here. So there you go. Starting to come together. Okay, so moving on from here, we're just going to start adding in whatever looks cool to us. So if you're following along, I really suggest that you kind of do your own thing. But I'll show you what I do just to kind of give you some ideas. So I'm going to go ahead and add a circle element for his hand here. So we're just going to go through the different circle elements till we see something that we like. Okay, so this one looks kind of cool to me, so I'm going to go ahead and use it for the left hand. So again, let's select the in clip, the loop clip, and the out clip, and we'll select all three, drag it to a new comp, and let's sequence layers, single composition, hit OK. And so here we go. Animates in like that. It's pretty cool. So I'm going to go back to our comp here, and we'll just drag that right onto his left hand. Position it kind of centered around the palm here, and let's just position it right above the left hand null, and I'm going to push it to where it animates on at a better time, so right about there. And let's go ahead and parent it to the left hand object. And sometimes you'll notice, because these elements are so detailed and it's kind of a brighter background, you might want to boost up the alpha channel a little bit to make it pop out more. So I'm going to go click on our circle layer here, and I'm going to go select a color correction, curves. And here on this drop down, we're going to drop that down to alpha, okay? And you'll get this kind of gray line here, and we're just going to shift that up. And so as you can see, it kind of makes it pop out from the background a little bit more when you do that. And then I'm going to go ahead and just steal that same glow from our other layer. Just hit Command C, copy it, and we'll Command V to paste it to our circle layer here. And let's just keep working on this left hand here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a graph element to his left hand here. And in here, we'll see all of our different graph elements. These are some of my favorites from the pack. They're just really, really well detailed. I like these ones right here. They kind of look like, maybe a meter of how much like web stuff he still has. We're going to drag that in and put it right above the left palm. And I'm going to hit the S key and scale it down. Now, this element in particular doesn't have the infinite loop, so we're going to actually use two of them. And I like this one down here for the left hand as well. So I'm going to grab the three elements there. We're going to create a loop, sequence all the same settings as before, hit OK. And now go back to the main comp, we'll drag that in. And let's just position that after the other one has faded out. And we'll do all the same sort of stuff to rescale. Put that right in the middle of the palm there. Bring it down to the left hand. Do the same with our other graph. Parent both of those to the correct null layer. I'm going to steal the settings from our circle layer, copy those. So we're going to select both of those effects, hit Command C to copy, and then we'll select our other two layers, Command V to paste. And just like the other layers, we're going to set those all to add. And another element that I really like for this is this graph 17 element. So I'm going to drag that right above the graph 4 element here. I'm going to rotate it just till it gets to a point that I like the way it looks. And I think right about there is good. And just keep the center right in the center of the palm there. And let's go ahead and parent it to the left hand null and add in our settings from the other layers there. And so obviously now it's starting to look a little bit too busy in that particular portion. So I'm going to just turn down the opacity on that layer there. Just want to add some subtle texture. And again, set it to add mode. And I think here we can actually lose the curves with the alpha boost there. Okay, that's starting to look better. I'm going to go ahead and select the Graph 17 layer and select the ellipse tool and just drag a mask in this center area here and just make sure you get a pretty perfect circle there. If you click on the mask itself and then just kind of mouse over this edge here, you can shift it around. And then I'm going to go ahead and invert that mask. Okay, so now we have the mask kind of cut out to the center of the hand, and I'm going to just feather that out a little bit. Let's say 80. And let's hop back into Premiere, check what it looks like color corrected. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate our Graph 17 layer, and we'll just move that over to the right hand. Just do the same sort of thing, and I'm going to rotate it, and it's just going to be kind of the opposite of the other side, just like that. And go ahead and make sure that you parent that to the correct null. Every time you create a new element, parent it to the correct null. And let's go ahead and also copy over the Circle 22 element, move it to the other hand, and let's move it up and parent it. And then now let's use a different, we have this Graph 4. I am going to go ahead and duplicate that, but I'm going to drag it up. And we're actually going to go ahead and replace that with a different one of those graphs, just so that it has different data than the other hand. So this one was Graph 4. Let's go ahead and pull in Graph 5. So we're going to click on the Graph 5 element, make sure that down here Graph 4 is selected, and hold down the Alt key and drag Graph 5 over onto the Graph 5 element. And what that's going to do is replace it, but it will keep all of the same settings and everything, and then you can just make sure it's extended to the edge here and just move it over to the other hand like so. So first off, we're going to go ahead and turn on motion blur for all layers button right here, and I'm going to go ahead and select all of our element layers like this, and we're going to click this button right here to enable motion blur. Okay, so if we go back and look in Premiere, here's what we've got so far. All we're going to do now is create the frame. Like if you go back to the original example, here you see this sort of frame for the HUD, and there's like some grid stuff here. So I'm going to go back into After Effects, and I'm going to just create a new comp. So I'm going to right click up here in the project bin and hit new composition. And we're just going to make it 1920 by 1080. Hit OK. So to start, I'm going to create the edges of the frame there. So a way that I like to do this is I'll create a solid, make it red. And I'm just going to shift it over a little bit. And then I'm going to make another one. And these are just going to serve as guides and just kind of stick it right about there. And this is going to help me kind of just keep good, even lines. So now I'm going to go ahead and make a new solid. And this one's going to be, let's just make it dark blue, kind of grayish dark blue, right about that. Hit OK, hit OK. And what we're going to do now is grab the pen tool. I'm going to select our dark blue solid here and come up here to this corner of the red solid here and start a mask by clicking right there, and we're going to just move right about there maybe and come down a ways and just use this red solid as a guide. And then we're going to come back down to this other side. Just try to match that angle there as good as you can. So as you can tell there, it's kind of off. That looks a little bit better. And then I'm going to come down some more, click again. Try to match that same angle, and we'll do it one more time. And obviously we've run out of space here. So now what we do is we just kind of keep altering these points till they look entirely even and symmetrical. So I'm just going to keep kind of moving these points around. This one's down a little too far. These need to shift up a bit. And we're going to select the last little node here for the mask, and we'll just close off that mask. So now we can go ahead and delete our two guide layers. So now we have this shape that we're going to go ahead and turn into the edges of our heads-up display. I'm going to duplicate it, and we'll make this one quite a bit brighter. Something like that. And I'm going to go to the mask settings, hit M. It'll bring up that mask from before, and I'm going to duplicate that mask by hitting Command D, duplicate, and we're going to subtract this time. And then on the subtracted mask, we'll feather it out like that, set it to add mode, and we'll turn down the opacity. Okay, and we'll do another one. Shift this one forward ever so slightly, and come to the subtracted mask, and we'll get rid of all the feathering there. And we'll set the expansion here on this we want to create kind of a little glowy line, and I'll just set the expansion there, probably negative 16, and then we'll add a glow to it. So click on it, go up to Effect, Stylize Glow. And then what we're going to do is just go ahead and duplicate that. So I'm going to select all of that stuff, hit Command D to duplicate, and I'm going to shift these further back. I'm going to select all the 3 of those layers there, and I'm going to go up to Color Correction, Hue, and Saturation, and we're just going to turn that to a bit of a dark red, like that. And we're also going to turn down the mask expansion on the top one, just so it's a smaller little line there. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of those layers there, and we're going to pre-compose it and just call it frame side, hit OK. And we're going to duplicate it, hit R for rotate, and rotate that by 180 degrees. Now I'm going to add a grid to the whole thing. So let's find the grid section here, and let's just find a grid that we like. And this was the one I used in the example, and I actually really like it. So I'm going to pull that in. I'm just going to go ahead and take the loop element, and I'm going to go to Interpret, Main, and we'll just loop it like 99 times. Now I can just drag it underneath, and then really from here, just like the hands, you can do whatever you like. I'm gonna start throwing some stuff on here using all kinds of different elements and just really fill it out. So here's what I put together for the frame here. So this is just a whole bunch of the tiny objects elements, just filling the side of the frame here, and a bunch of code and some graphs and things like that. And it really just fills in and adds a lot of detail really quickly. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go back to our original composition here, and I'm going to go ahead and take this comp, our spider frame here, and just drag it on top of the whole thing. Okay, so now we have the frame here, but it looks way too uniform. And in the original example, what I did was I went to Effect, Distort, and grabbed the bulge tool, and we'll select the bulge effect here, and let's size up the area that the bulge effect covers here, and we'll just kind of resize this area of influence here of the effect until it looks about right. So now it kind of has this look like we're looking through maybe a lens or something like that. It has the distortion on the edges a little too much. I'm going to turn that down to maybe, let's try something like 0.7. And now I kind of think the edges of the frame here are a little bit too, bright. So I'm going to select our spider frame element here. I'm going to go to Effect, Color Correction, Curves, and I'm going to just bring down the darks on it quite a bit, and we'll punch up the highlights. Looking pretty cool. And then the last thing I'm going to do is add an adjustment layer on top of everything in here, and just to kind of merge everything together visually, I'm going to just add a little bit of a contrast curve to the whole thing. If you wanted to change the color of any of these elements, it's really easy to do. All you have to do is just select your element, go up to Effect, grab a Hue and Saturation effect, and if you just grab this U slider around, you'll change the color that way. Or if you wanted to, you could go ahead and create like an adjustment layer, and on that adjustment layer, maybe add like a fill effect. Just let's say you wanted like part of it to be orange. All you need to do is just, on your adjustment layer with the fill effect, grab the pen tool and just, mask out maybe this little chunk right here, something like that. And now you have a portion in that color. And okay, so here's what we ended up with when we hop back to Premiere. So yeah, pretty cool. In a short period of time, we were able to use the interface heads-up display elements to create a pretty highly detailed look for this special effects shot. And obviously there are a lot of different uses for these elements. There are a lot of things to choose from and lots of cool stuff with a lot of detail. And be sure to head over to RocketStock.com and check out some of our other video packs, and keep an eye out for some more that we'll be releasing very soon.